My name's Ben. Welcome to the Nottingham Data Science and AI Meetup in our brand new location. I hope you appreciate the brand new slides. Don't be angry, but I did new images and none of them were actually done by AI. They're all actually pictures taken by people because I thought they looked nice this time. But yeah, so welcome. This is, so we have a new sponsorship from the CBIT Business Venture and the Center for Business Industry Transformation, both which have run out of NTU, which is very exciting. So that means that we are going to start doing, all of our meetups will be in one of the rooms. This is actually our sort of backup room. So we have a bigger room that we'll be going to next month. All new exciting things, new sponsors, new video, new slides, new everything. So who are we? We are the Nottingham Data Science and AI group. But we are here to talk about data science and AI. We're here for, well, anyone who's on this list. If you're on the list, you're welcome. If you're not on the list, you're welcome. But basically, we're here as the idea of creating a community and an ecosystem of innovation around AI in the city to encourage people to talk about it, to learn about it, and to get involved in it. So with that, I will now pass over the floor to fellow Canadian. Very rare that you'll get two Canadians in a room, but it's happened tonight. So my fellow Canadian, and I swear we didn't know each other in Canada. We met here, just happened to both be here. But Eric Bai, who's going to talk about High Agency AI, the meeting that could have been execution with High Agency AI, the meeting that could have been execution. Please welcome Eric Bai.
Hey everyone, yeah, my name is Eric Bai. So today I'm going to talk about kind of high agency AI. So not AI agents, just agency as in the willingness and ability to get something done. I'm an AI consultant, and over the last few years doing that job, I've seen companies. One of the first companies I talked to spent 18 months delaying doing anything about AI because they were trying to write their AI policy. That's 2 years later, and they've just decided they needed AI training. One of the other first companies I spoke to they said, yep, AI is going to completely change our entire industry and our whole business. But first, before we do anything about it, we've got to write our 5-year plan. And it took about 9 months for them to get going. I've seen surveys and just comms to say, hey, we have AI tools delayed by 6-9 months because they couldn't get on top of just handing someone to do that task. And the other day I was talking to a friend who used to be an AI consultant. He's now head of marketing at a small business. And he showed me his AI roadmap. I'm like, oh, that looks amazing. He said, yeah, but I can't get anyone to actually do any of it because everyone's too busy. And they just don't have time to actually discuss and move forward on it. So today's all about kind of moving that forward. So ideas aren't the bottleneck anymore, agency is. And that willingness and ability to actually do something, whether you're in leadership or you're an intern, is really just what's scarce now. It has an incredible amount of leverage, and I think it's incredibly rare after decades of businesses kind of building up processes that sometimes were quite necessary and got them to move slower, but everything now is just moving much faster. There's a quote from Sam Altman that just kind of echoes in my head over and over and over since I heard it. And he just said, you can just do things now. What we're all capable of as individuals just continues to expand and grow constantly. The tools are accessible, and most people still aren't acting like this is true. There's not a lot of urgency, and a lot of the time companies have just ground that agency out of people. I started my kind of career in tech at startups. So my first job in tech was for an AI startup in Berlin, and then I was running product and operations in the Internet of Things and e-commerce. And then after that, was first full-time employee at a fintech company, launched our first product, built our first team. And those were incredibly high agency environments. There was no, that's not my problem. If you saw a problem, you just fixed it and got it done. If you saw an opportunity, you were empowered to just kind of execute on that. And that bias towards action really allows kind of small teams ready to move fast to act far differently and really outpace more traditional businesses. About 8 years ago, I moved out to the UK, where I then moved into enterprise digital transformation. And that was incredibly different. On one side, we're still getting value from data and technology for our customers, internal and external, working with everyone from lorry drivers up to C-suite. But on the other side, they just moved really, really slow. There was a lot of politics. Our team by definition was supposed to have a lot of agency, but we were going through a system implementation, and we would say, look, we found a new opportunity, or we found a problem we want to solve, and they would say, wait for the new system, it's going to solve that too. I think when I left, it was 1 or 2 years late, and that system ended up being at least 4 years late. So really, they ended up grinding the agency completely out of the team. A lot of people had to leave because they just couldn't stand not being able to get things done when it was really obvious what needed to happen. And so I started my own company. On one side, some organizations pay consultants to be the high agency person because you can work around their internal stuff. I kind of almost had to edit this slide out after I saw PwC was paid £4.1 million last week to release a website for the government to help people train on AI that is just linking to Microsoft and Amazon courses that I could have built in a week. Starting to think I'm in the wrong side of consulting. But I started Airtron AI to help clients actually become higher agency. I saw tons of businesses across, I think, the Midlands in particular, that were just really, really behind. Almost every single business I've met or spoken to is nowhere near where we were at in 2013 at a tech startup, and we weren't even that far ahead. They might have a CRM, but they don't really know how to use it. I've seen really large organizations managing all of their customer service on shared inboxes, and they're just used to moving at quite a slow pace, but now there's actually a really important need to move at a completely different pace than they're used to. So the conversation has to kind of shift on from what should we discuss, like meetings and planning and meetings about meetings and meetings about meetings about meetings, to what can I ship? It's like experiments, evidence, research, just momentum. And a lot of that speed isn't about AI. It might be enabled by AI. It's just about doing something. So tonight's also sort of just a call to action that you can just do something a lot of the time, and a lot of people just forget that. So we've been here before. Like I mentioned, the UK just sat out most of the last kind of digital revolution. And this time could be the same, but this time it'll be a lot higher impact. We all seen the headlines about zombie companies in the paper that are going to have been struggling as energy prices go up and taxes go up by a couple percent. And this time they're going to have a lot more competition coming, and they're going to have to move far, far faster than they ever have before. And if you're an individual working for a company, waiting around for your manager to decide to change the whole organization just might not be fast enough, but you have the opportunity to actually change stuff from within and get things done. So technology arrives and the value doesn't follow. In past kind of digital revolutions, we've seen a lot of people just get tools. I think Excel is probably one tool that almost no business uses to the kind of level it's capable of. It's the biggest competitor to every software startup in the world, but almost no companies are actually using it, and they don't even realize that. And I'm seeing the same thing with AI. They might buy Copilot licenses, maybe do some training, and then just wonder where the value is coming from. They're not changing their work. They're not putting effort into extracting that value. And they're really not building habits around leveraging it and experimenting with it as well. And while they deliberated, the window closed. It wasn't that they couldn't compete, but by the time they decided, so those zombie companies, when things did get tough, suddenly they were in a place where they actually didn't have the time or money or skills and knowledge internally to actually invest in it and turn things around. But we don't have to let that be this wave of change. I think that's because AI is the great enabler. It won't just change things, but also makes agency cheap. One of the things with all that past planning in the past is that action was pretty expensive. Execution could take a lot of planning just to get something small done. But over the last few years, that's really started to change, and that's really turning around what's possible. The speed is unprecedented. We're seeing technology and software go from niche to ubiquitous in months or even days sometimes. Tiny teams are eating niches, so we're starting to see more niche software companies standing up and being like, we don't need to raise money. Or startup people leave their companies to start startups that, look, when you realize you can take 10% of your company's business but do it with 1/100th of the staff, you're going to start doing that. The really fun thing about this is that the AI can bootstrap itself. It's amazing being able to teach people how to use technology and being able to say it can help you use it along the way. That didn't happen with CRMs or anything else, but it also enables you to build technology on top of that technology. And then finally, opportunities everywhere. There's a huge capability gap at the moment with kind of what's possible is way further ahead than what people are actually doing. So it's not just, oh, we need to get ahead by implementing the new AI SaaS software. It's that what you can do on top of it is actually new, novel value. And every business, well, I hope every business I think you probably want to work at, is desperate for people who can ship. Not just people who can talk about or plan AI, people who can actually get things done. And that's what's scarce, and that scarcity should hopefully be your leverage. So the old sequence was discuss, decide, plan, resource, execute. And this made sense, as I mentioned, when execution was expensive and building software took months. Analysis required specialists, and you had to invest in that planning to de-risk execution. I think that got probably went too far in one direction, and now people are really struggling to pull it back on the other side. I know we all talk about talk is cheap, but talk isn't cheap within an organization. Meetings and planning docs and approval processes and alignment, all this is a real cost, even when it's not on the P&L. So one thing I did forget to mention at the very beginning of this is I'm not saying download Claudebot onto your work computer and plug your laptop into every single AI tool out there. There are still checks and balances that are definitely worth doing. It's just there is a lot more action that you can take without having to go through kind of 6 months of planning. So execution is cheap now. I've seen days of analysis happen in minutes, working prototypes in hours. I've gotten to the point as well where it's actually faster for me to build a fully functional prototype for my client than it is for me to write a memo about a meeting and then for them to talk about whether they might want me to build that prototype. And then those types of things are then being put in front of customers and being sold for far more money than they're paying me. And then, teams for research, just being done by individuals. The one thing to be cautious with here is just make sure you have enough knowledge about what you're using AI for that you know whether or not the output is good or bad. So why does this kind of happen? That organizational memory, muscle memory is really slowing things down. Those processes built for a world where execution was really expensive. They're a decade or two old now, and but the context has completely changed. These kind of things suppress agency, and people learn that trying leads to friction, and so they just give up and kind of stop trying, stop putting ideas forward, because there has never been a path for them. And that agency has been structurally eroding. I'm sure you've all heard someone say, that's not my job, or you're in a silo so you don't actually have visibility into things, and approval chains adding layer each layer adds that friction. For most people, just doing the thing isn't even on their mental list of options anymore. My friend who used to be an AI consultant and had that beautiful AI roadmap for his company, when I looked at it, I said, look, you can actually do every single thing on that list, and you could write that prompt or build that workflow or do that analysis and just hand it to them. And they could see what that value is. Suddenly it's tangible and you're gonna get way more engagement and you're really moving that thing forward. And he hadn't even considered it. And he's a pretty bright guy, really with it, was trying to start his own AI company. And it is just that a lot of the time you forget that the things that you're thinking about, you don't need someone else to do for you. You can just do it on their behalf in 30 minutes and show them something working and use AI to make that tangible. But the high agency mindset has to be consciously built. And it's not just about technology, it's about building new habits and reflexes. I still go into meeting mode, writing a document mode sometimes, when what I should really be doing is spending the same amount of time just showing someone how it works or showing them the results. So who's seen this within their business when you try to do something and they just kind of push it back for the next budget or the next planning cycle, even if it's a simple thing? And then who is too frustrated to wait and just does it anyways? Good to see some of the same hands going up. So what does high agency look like in practice? Look at your list of ideas and figure out, is there something you could just do? A lot of things sit in backlogs, not because they're blocked, but because nobody's just looked at it and tried to do it. At this point, I bet a lot of your backlogs are probably mostly irrelevant or should probably be changed or transformed pretty significantly as well. But it doesn't take a lot of time. You can just pick one thing and run an experiment. There's lots of different ways to work around governance requirements. You don't always have to plug something into your data and your systems to prove that it works. You don't always have to put really private information into something to do some interesting analysis. And you don't always have to go through a 6-month approval process to get the tools that you need. So you want to build a bias towards action. Building a prototype, it doesn't have to be polished to exist, turning prompts into workflows, setting up a lunch and learn or a hackathon. I've seen people talk about wanting to set up lunch and learns, and then they realize the approval process is too slow when all they had to do was invite a few people to lunch. Running analysis on that question that's been nagging you. There's so many different things you can do, and if you didn't have that skill before, suddenly it's become unlocked. The number of businesses I've seen where people say, I've got this great question and it's going to take 6 months for an analyst to look at it and it might be worth a ton of money, and then they just stop there, is obscene, and there's no excuse for that anymore. And then then think beyond the task. A lot of people start with kind of, how can I summarize this? How can AI do that task? But the really interesting things start to happen when you say, all right, what happens if I do this task at scale? I was working with a company. They had a team of people that would they would do some Google searches every morning, and then they would, once a week, send a report to a client, and they got paid a lot of money for this. I said, well, what happens if you do that? So yes, we can automate it, but if once we automate it, we can suddenly monitor every competitor in every language, in every country in the world, plus all of your other customers that you have that you don't do this for at the moment. And you're actually going to spend more time on it, but that value really starts to increase. You're not just expanding the scale, but you're expanding the coverage, and suddenly you have an asset and a product. So when you're experimenting, when you're trying things out, really encourage you to kind of think a few steps beyond and keep asking, and then what? Rather than just stopping with, all right, I can use AI to summarize this document. There's a lot more you can do beyond that. And a lot of people, there's a huge fear of failure. I think there's also a cultural thing in Europe around failure a little bit, but a failed experiment can teach you in a week more than 6 months of planning ever will. The goal isn't that every try succeeds. The goal is learning faster from reality than from debate. So the question is, how quickly can I find out, and what can I learn along the way? A lot of the experiments that I do aren't necessarily directly related to the thing that I'm working on, but I reapply that learning into everything else that I'm doing. So there's lots of different ways to have fun with that. But then impact also, for that agency to have impact, it requires visibility. If an experiment ships in the woods and no one's aware of it, did it actually ship? And this isn't just about self-promotion, it's making your experiments useful to others. A lot of people then go right back to, I should create a big deck and have a whole bunch of meetings and create a huge document no one's going to read. But you can use AI to create far more engaging decks, to think about different types of output. I'm having huge success just using Notebook LM to turn things into little videos. I'm creating podcasts for clients because I know that they're on the road a lot and probably don't have time to actually sit down and read what it is I want them to read. Video walkthroughs. There's a whole bunch of different ways to get creative that are also far easier, because one of the other blockers as far as getting that impact moving forward and things going beyond that experimentation stage is people actually knowing what happened, and it's just getting easier and easier to communicate that in much more engaging and interesting ways, especially while people are dealing with getting more and more documents that are kind of that corporate slop. And then a quick one for managers. You have people that can just get things done. I've seen a lot of managers just kind of forget that their teams are all probably pretty happy and would like it way more if they could just do things. And you can make that easier for them, building structures and frameworks for them to make decisions easier, making policies really clear so it's not a 6-month approval process. The biggest one I've found is not giving time to experiment. I think that's the biggest barrier to like AI adoption and agency and getting things done at the moment, is a lot of people just don't have an hour or two a week to sit down and try and solve an interesting problem. I did some just basic or relatively complex prompt engineering for a client the other week, and it only took me 4 hours, but there's no way they would have had 4 hours in their day to sit down and solve that, but that's saving them 400 or 500 hours a year. And so just a little reminder for managers there. Because the big thing also is that the companies that can't nurture this energy are going to breed their future competition. If you're a company and you're showing people a 5-year roadmap where in 2 years they're going to get access to tools that will then be 2 years old, and be able to do things that are out of date, people are going to realize that as an individual, they're probably not going to be competitive on the market. As a company, there's actually far more risk to their job from AI, not because AI is going to take their job, but because their company isn't going to make it through that. So they will leave and start competitors. And then if you're early in your career, you just haven't learned the slow habits yet, and try not to let people. Look for high agency environments, startups, small teams, or organizations that reward and empower initiative. They are out there, but it's really worth thinking about how that looks, because especially for junior people going into those roles, you want to be able to prove that you can get things done and create value right away. In a high agency environment, that's possible. In an environment where you might be doing more basic work for the first few years and don't have that freedom, it's going to be really hard to prove your value when a lot of companies are going through some tough times. So I'll say walk out tonight with one thing that you're going to try. If you're a student at the moment, I'm sure there's tons of different things you can try. Just listening to a podcast on the way in, and every single person on the podcast just said, just start building stuff. Show people that you can build things and create things. It's not expensive at the moment, and it's getting easier and easier. And the best way to learn this technology and build that reflex to take action and have agency is to build stuff. And high agency is contagious, and right now it's exactly what's needed. A lot of companies are so used to moving slow, and to stay competitive, they're going to have to move a lot quicker. And it will be people in the room like yourselves that are going to be able to change those habits and spread that mindset and show others what's possible while being that example. So to finish with, I just don't think there's ever been a more exciting time. What we're all capable of doing as individuals or organizations continues to grow at an exponential rate. What I can do today is completely different from what I could do a few months ago. And for my clients and the organizations I work with and talk to, it's completely changing for them as well. So while it can be a bit ominous in the AI space, I think everyone in this room is hopefully on the optimistic side. Just remember as well that it is a really exciting time. And if you go into this with some high agency mindsets, you can start to get huge things done, things that were probably never possible. So, thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah.
In a business environment, how do you get through or address governance and particularly if you're introducing new tools and software, the security concerns people have? How do you tackle that?
From a few different angles. On one side, trying to build prototypes and make it tangible to legal teams and decision makers before needing it to plug into something high risk. So you can get into that, you can get the initial tool and just be like, this is in an isolated environment. And the other way is reframing things to legal teams and actually educating legal teams on AI. It's more
the security teams that I find are the ones that stop things too quickly.
Again, I think a lot of it comes down to education, bringing up alternatives, talking about is there another path forward on this, case studies, examples, certifications. Like there's always a way. If you can show that there's a path forward with the stuff that's easy to use, then you can just put a price tag on the stuff that's more difficult to use. I'm talking to a company at the moment that's all the cloud companies are trying to pitch them sovereign AI and buying their own GPUs and say, all right, show me on your.
I've got something far more trivial than that.
Oh, okay.
So I've got a client that if you want to implement any application, it has to be connected to Active Directory. Yeah. And in order to connect to Active Directory, you have to give them they have to get the latest set of penetration testing results. And they will not allow you to do anything until those two things happen.
Yeah, on that side, you might just have to work with vendors and find vendors that are going to be a little bit easier to work with, or find an umbrella, like a broader vendor that has a lot of stuff you need within it. And once you get them signed off, then it's easier to do more stuff within that environment. But yeah, I've got a client at the moment who's shifting towards everything needing to be SSO with their own AD group, and that's going to be an interesting journey on that front. Because I think a lot of the old certification stuff, like it's great that they've got a pen testing report, and lots of companies do, but I suspect they've also been changing things so often that it's probably not worth the paper it's written on. But I'm not a security expert as well, so I try and be very careful in those conversations. Any other questions? Yeah.
So just a general question about how you can encourage the adoption of AI within an organization where they are resistant to change, because people are kind of scared that AI is going to make them feel redundant.
Yeah.
Because if you have a team that's focused on probably cleaning up the data and you try to automate that, then they start to think of reducing that team. So people would find reasons not to let the AI solution you're trying to implement get used. So how do you encourage the adoption of AI without disrupting already established process?
Yeah, so to start with, working with leadership to get communication right. So I don't say, if I'm going in to do training somewhere, that's usually how most of my engagements start, is training. I make sure that they don't just send an invite out to say, hey, we're doing AI training. I make sure that invite includes, we're doing AI training, this is how we feel about AI, but there's leadership in the room to explain what AI means to them and their jobs. And I find most of the time, once we can get people into that session and teach them about it and focus on not just the efficiencies, but the additional value it's going to create, people tend to be much less worried about it, because in the end, most companies have far more work than they're able to handle and way more projects that they want to be able to do, and they'd much rather people were creating new value rather than just doing the basic stuff where AI might be more of a threat. And a lot of coaching them on kind of getting over that hump. Ongoing adoption is a bit trickier. Ongoing communications, helping people celebrate success, because adoption is one part of the problem, but the other part is that a lot of people just don't talk about and they'll hide how they use AI. So you have everyone in a business learning things from first principles, not sharing all that time and effort they put into it and what they've learned, because they just don't want to share it. But when you start rewarding success, getting people talking about it, sharing their ideas, you can kind of start to shift that culture into something a bit more engaged with and not fearful of AI. That said, in certain types of organizations where there's certain types of roles that are more at risk, it will be and is a fair bit more difficult. But in general, I find people are really open to it once they learn a little bit about it, and it's been demystified, and it becomes a lot less scary. Question. Thank you.
Do you think it's going to change the nature of work, where in a company to provide value as an employee, you're going to have to be basically, as you say, more agency, you're going to have more agency. They're going to value people who are able to take on a whole project rather than just do a task.
100%. I think there's no way around it. And that's going to be a huge change. I think one of the ways I saw some people in the Bay Area describe it the other day is that they're starting to feel like it's almost vampiric. Because before I used to do some admin tasks, and now like my work by the end of the day I'm drained because 100% of my work is deep thinking, because I'm not dealing with the slower kind of monotonous admin that I might have before. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how we handle that. But yeah, I think the expectations are changing massively. I'm seeing it initially with professional services companies where it's actually their clients saying, actually our expectations of what you should deliver have completely changed, and we expect you to use AI to drive down costs. I'm seeing it less so with managers at the moment outside of developers, but I'm starting to see it kind of come up, especially as we start, over the last few months, we start to crack things where suddenly it can do a lot of the tasks that it wasn't able to do before.
But it will be, so that would be like a massive cultural shift. And I don't mean just business culture, I mean everything. Yeah, suddenly the value that people have is thinking.
Yeah,
If everyone
what a world.
starts thinking.
It's going to be, and I can see it being difficult to coordinate and orchestrate as well when you have individuals that are able to run whole projects forward without talking to anybody. You'll need a lot different processes that can move a lot quicker to manage that. Sort of teams running teams of agents, and yeah, it's going to be like really interesting next couple of years.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
In your consulting work or that side, have you noticed a pattern where the clients probably like struggle most with in terms of agency? Because like for example, a candidate searching for jobs. Uh, so, what kind of problems would these companies would like to see solved, or like what high agency thing that a candidate can do to get their attention? Or
Yeah, it's a good question. It really depends on the company. When I'm working with companies that work more on the like digital and tech and commercial side, then being able to spin up prototypes or analyze data to identify problems and solutions, that data analysis tends to be a big one. When it's companies that are a bit more traditional, sometimes it's just more process oriented. Have you tried this? Helping them figure out and understand new technology. And being able to look at stuff from with a broad commercial mindset. Being commercially aware, not just of what's happening in your role, but how what happens in your role can affect other teams, where that tends to be a blocker when you try and change something and you say you haven't thought about, oh, this is going to hit this team like this and this team like this. Instead, if you can think about it and communicate it, like actually this is going to positively benefit this team like this, as well as yourself and everyone else. And as you start to learn how to not just execute, but identify those opportunities. And the tough thing is when you're early, it does take a lot of experimentation and practice to understand what are the relevant opportunities and develop that sort of taste for where it's worth putting that time and effort.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the sort of the rise over the last few years of the current wave of AI, and how people have gone through a kind of a life cycle that certainly does seem to be a cycle, that there are high expectations and then disappointment, and then this sort of boom and bust in terms of expectations.
Yeah.
That's ongoing. So I'm wondering, twofold really, kind of on an emotional level and on a practical level. Do you find that a challenge? Do you address that with your clients? Like, you'll find it a challenge, and then they really dive into it, and then maybe their expectations aren't quite met, and they're constantly, having this cycle that all of us go through, I think, and just getting them to come to terms with that.
A little bit. This is why even if I'm doing technical projects, I like to start all my stuff off with some training, because a lot of my first conversations are, we want AI to do this, and essentially it's running their entire business and getting them all their sales for free. And so I try and set expectations around what's possible really early on, so that all future conversations are grounded in some sort of reality. But that sort of jagged edge of capabilities, they call it, where AI can be really, really good at one thing 99% of the time, and an almost identical task it will fail on like 75% of the time, is something that just takes that experimentation and that culture of experimentation to say, all right, I'm just going to try this quick, and then I'm going to move on, and I'll keep it in a list, and I'll try it in 6 months when the next tool comes out. So I've not seen it be too bad. I think the hype cycle in the news and in different social media spaces has made it more difficult in certain sectors where, like in the design world, all the design influencers with AI tools have said, look at this one crazy trick, and the reality is it probably took them a week to build that one workflow and get it to work just for that video, but they're all affiliates for those companies. So when people have been exposed to that, it can be a bit more frustrating and difficult, or their clients have been exposed to that as well. But that kind of jagged edge is really smoothing out over the last kind of month or two, where suddenly a lot of the things that like at least knowledge workers got frustrated with, like, oh, I want AI to create me a PowerPoint slide, and somehow Claude and Anthropic just released Claude for PowerPoint tonight before Microsoft released AI for PowerPoint that was useful in a meaningful way. So we are seeing a lot of it smooth out, and if people are informed and experimenting, then it kind of settles those peaks and troughs, because they are getting those wins, but they're starting to build that intuition for where it will fail, and they're starting to learn how to read between the lines of the hype. We're at a weird moment right now where there's a lot of bubble talk, where people are saying, look, it's a bubble. Well, there's near infinite demand for this stuff. No one's got enough GPUs to launch the products that they want to launch. And it's not, like, the improvements aren't slowing down. So if OpenAI goes out of business, someone's going to pick up all their data centers, because there's no, like, the demand for intelligence is just infinite, I personally believe. So yeah, not as much stress with the non-technical businesses and leadership that I generally work with. Any other question? Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess in a business, I can see kind of two different types of problems, class of problem. Like one's solving existing problems, and the other one is like the exploration or research you were talking about.
Yeah.
Solving new problems, create new products, and that's like the attractive one. Like, do you see that there's potential for, if you have an imbalance between those and you're generating a lot of new things and not maintaining or improving efficiency on the old things, that you end up kind of with like amassing a huge technical debt, for example?
I can see that being a problem. I've in my experience in the companies I'm working with, because they tend to have like smaller technical teams, the problem is much more getting to focus on solving the problems that they have already in general. But when you can connect, because a lot of the time where the actual new things come from is actually solving a problem they have or fixing something that they have. Say, oh, once you fix that, then you kind of see, all right, well, we've fixed this and automated it, but now we can scale it. Now we can add new value to our customers. Now we can create a new product on top of it. So a lot of the natural places the sort of invention side comes out is actually addressing the problems that they have already. I think there's not a lot of sort of more traditional non-startup-y companies like looking to spin up a ton of vibe-coded apps and launch them. But it's going to be interesting to see how certain companies deal with it, because I think there are companies out there building up tons of technical debt and security issues. N8N, which I know a lot of people are building tons of automations off of for their whole company, just had 2 super critical vulnerabilities. And I know a lot of AI consultants are spinning up self-hosted N8N instances. So yeah, it's going to be a mix, and probably a bit of a dumpster fire for some and a gold rush for others. Long way of saying it can go every direction.
Every direction at once.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Anyone else?
No? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, pizzas are here, so I'll try not to be too long closing up. See if I can figure out how technology works. Oh, there we go, cool. So yeah, thank you very much, Eric. That was really interesting. So we're always looking for interesting speakers. So if anybody wants to speak about something or knows somebody who wants to speak, please get in touch with any of the organizers. In this room, there's me, there's Bert, there's Pog. So yeah, blue, purple hair, guy in the pink shirt, or anyone who's standing out there, or Georgie, he's an organizer as well. So yeah, so let us. So do please let us know. Really, it can be just about anything. And with the new room, both this room that we're in this week and the room that we're going to be in next month, the room that we'll be in next month, it's kind of good for doing workshops and that type of thing. So we might try and bring, which is something we did in the early days, which is something where somebody kind of does sort of something interesting, and everyone else can follow along on their laptop if they wanted to. So this is a bit random. So has anyone heard of this by any chance? Quill.ai. So this was a project that came up. So this is me just like that dumpster fire that you're talking about AI. Now I'm pouring all the water that's being used for AI onto that fire. So this is a group in Chile that were raising awareness to a specific area that they lived in that was basically having water problems because of AI. There's a real issue out there with water consumption, cooling, all these GPUs and all that in AI. I think it's something that we haven't explored yet, and because we're so focused on the positives, which is good because that's what we're here for, it's also interesting to look at some of the other sides as well. So if anyone knows anyone who has done research into environmental impact of AI or water consumption in AI, do please let me know, because that's a speaker that I really, that's someone I really want to find. Also, if you get a chance to look at this website, it's quite sweet. Basically what they did is they had a village of people suggested that rather than using AI, send them what you would send to AI, and they'll answer you. So they had about 13 people from this village, and there was someone who's a graphic designer, there was a plumber, there was a mother, there was a whole bunch of different people, and they were able to answer your AI questions, and I thought that was kind of cool. But yeah, so if anyone knows anyone who can speak about, especially something, what I'm really looking for is someone who can speak about AI and the environmental impacts with a view to what we can actually do about them, because it's great to say this is what's wrong, but we kind of need solutions as well. So we have a load of resources that you can use. We've got a LinkedIn server, a Discord server. We've got a LinkedIn group that occasionally gets used, but not very much. Obviously, we have the Meetup. So do feel free to get onto any of those resources, particularly the Discord server, which should have, and there's a link to it in all the invites that we come out. And yeah, that's about it. So we meet the first Thursday of every month, except for the months that we don't meet on the first Thursday, and we meet on another Thursday instead. Big shout out to our sponsors, of course. I've mentioned the NTU Business School, who are here and sponsoring who's sponsoring the rooms. That's Georgia over there, and